All right. Peace and blessings, brothers and sisters. Once again, this is the Cosmocentric Mystic. Coming at you today with kind of a report, once again, on early Christianity. So we are going to be talking about a group that quite possibly was the first converts to Christianity, the first followers of Jesus, and what it is that they believed. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you all. So we'll get right to it. Hold a second. Let's go with the slideshow. My computer's acting slow. So essentially, we're going to be talking about Christian Jews. Now, it should be obvious that the first converts to Christianity were Jews, but for some reason it's not. It's just not something that we think about in modern day terms, because when you think of Christianity now, it's kind of like this amorphous kind of organization or thing that's always existed, and we don't really try to consider its inception and the things that it went through as it was developing. But it went through a lot of different changes, a lot of different discussions, a lot of different movements. It wasn't this orthodox that we see today. So these next couple of lectures that you see, we're going to explore different types. And this first types are Christian Jews. All right. So what was their philosophy? They were adoptionists. Now, adoptionists maintained that Jesus was a human adopted by God to be his son. So they used that verse at the baptism of Jesus when the heavens open up and then God says, on this day you are now my son, or something of that nature. And so for the Ebionites, they're called the Ebionites. For the Ebionites, Jesus was such a perfect example of what it meant to be a human that God was so impressed and proud of Jesus, or Jesus walked the path to God so much that God adopted Jesus to be his son. So the term Ebionite, it goes back to the Hebrew word for poor, which is Ebion, those who are poor. They believed in voluntary poverty and communal living, not our communal living, but and communal living. So, of course, you believe in voluntary poverty in a communal living space, because you don't just believe in being homeless without work, but what you do believe in is not getting material wealth and gain for self, but for others and for those that are connected with you and your group. The proto-Orthodox view of them. So proto-Orthodox were people that held the view that would eventually become the dominant view that Christianity holds like modern day. And these people, Orthodox, the proto-Orthodox view events. These were the Athanasius, the Eusebius, the Irenaeus, Justin Martyr type cats. Eventually, this view is the one that the state of Rome picked up, and that's why Christianity was able to take off the way it did. Was because it had state backing, a Roman power behind it. So, but early on, the proto-Orthodox people, they condemned the Ebionites, as a matter of fact. So what is orthodoxy? Orthodoxy means the right opinion or the correct belief. It's a set of beliefs that's determined to be right. Orthodox, people who hold beliefs that other people have determined to be true. Now, heresy just means choice. And so a heretic is someone who has chosen not to believe the belief that other people have deemed to be true. Basically a free thinker almost, to a degree. They believe other things than what you told them to believe. So as a result, in the early church, they branded them, they started using this term heresy and heretics in order to brand people, much like what you have in the community today, as people are using this term pseudo to brand brothers and sisters that are spiritual. And it's kind of a derogatory term. So orthodoxy. So heterodox means another to beliefs. So as you can see, Ebionites, they were branded heretics by the proto-Orthodox. So their views were close to the views held by Jesus and his followers. They were Jews, and they were Jews that chose to believe in Christ. So we can say that, one, we know this. Jesus was a Jew. He wasn't a Greek, well, he wasn't he didn't hold on to the polytheistic beliefs of the people in the area of the dominant Roman society. He was a Jew. His followers were Jews. All throughout the Bible, they say that he came to fulfill not the Roman law, not the Greek law, but Jewish law. Everybody always says that Jesus came to be fulfillment of the law. And it holds this like esoteric, otherworldly feeling to it when you're like, oh, he came to fulfill the law. Okay. All right. Yeah. But in the back of your mind, you're like, what law are you talking about? That makes no sense, because we're not Jewish. And so we don't understand that in the Jewish culture, the law was the thing. That was a big thing with the Jews. Stay to the law, abide by the law. This is it. So it's something to do with Jewish culture. We're not privy to that because we come out on the tail end of this conversation in which Paul and his whole crew were, they won these discussions and these debates. And so by and large, the people that teach us the Bible, the people that teach us Christianity, aren't aware of the law themselves. They're just some preachers that get up and start talking and walking and doing their own thing and not really knowing what they're talking about, walking with. And so it ends up being crazy. So we don't really know when someone says Jesus came to fulfill the law, what that means. It's just an interesting saying that people say that they end up getting people with. And all his references, they're Jewish references. Jesus was a Jew. Jesus's original followers, Jesus's disciples were Jews. And so that's very easy when you really think about it. When you really give it some thought, yeah, that makes sense. Even Paul in Galatians, the people that he's talking to were Jews. The discussions that he's having in Galatians is with a Jewish sect of Christianity. This is back in 50 AD, just like 12 or 15 years after the crucifixion of Jesus, whenever this dude got put up. And so Paul comes along trying to tell these people that, the dominant society, everybody else, they don't have to be circumcised. They don't have to follow Jewish law. And this was the schism that he was having with this sect of Christians that were the original Christians before Paul came along, who said you have to follow the law. But unfortunately, we don't have any of their writings. Information that we have about them comes from two authors who were both the proto-Orthodox people, the people whose views, came to dominate Christianity today. We have Irenaeus, who was a bishop from France, and he talks about the Ebionites in his 5-volume book that he wrote in 180 against heresies. And then we have Epiphanius, a bishop from Salamis, who wrote a book in 340 against heresies. So we know that the Ebionites were in existence before Paul. They were in existence before Paul came through, and we see that they were still in existence in 340. They play a major role because in today's scholastic circles, people are discussing the role of Jewish Christians in the formation of Islam. And I'll do another video on that later because I'm still doing research on that myself. But I was watching a Brother Polite video, and he made reference to the Quran simply means song in Aramaic, which was the language of the Jewish Christians. Interesting. I was having a discussion with a brother online the other day who was trying to prove the validity of the Bible to me. And I was trying to tell him that Islam is related to Judaism, and he was disagreeing with me and trying to say that it was its own creation. And I was trying to prove to him that if you have the same figures in one philosophy that you have in a different philosophy, one of the two philosophies derived from the other. One came from the other. Like you have people who say that, Buddha was not Indian and Buddha is a Chinese thing, and it's not. Buddha was clearly Indian. If you look at Buddhism, it's an Indian practice that has went over into China. So people think of Buddhism nowadays, they think of the fat Buddha you see on top of restaurant doors, just laughing and doing all these other things. And the Chinese have metamorphosized Buddha's face where he looks Asian and whatnot, but Buddha was Indian. Buddha, more than likely, he was a dark-skinned man that came through and started talking about Buddhism, and who initiated people into Buddhism, and Buddhism spread. Now, what the Chinese have done, what the Asians have done, is they made Buddha look like them, which is what people do. And so there's nothing wrong with that. However, it gives you a misconception on what Buddha truly was. So anyway, so who are they? They were either born or converted into Jews. They kept Jewish customs and followed Jewish laws. They believed that Jesus was the Messiah of God. Messiah of God, someone that God adopted. Okay, to be Jewish in the ancient world, to you, everybody was pagan. Anybody who was not Jewish was a polytheist. And if you were neither Jewish or Christian, that's what you were. You believed in multiple gods. So to the Jews, they worshiped the one true God who chose them to be his people and gave them his law. The Jewish law was given by Moses. Interestingly enough, Philo was a Jewish philosopher who lived during the time of Jesus and Paul and made Moses out to be a God-man in the Jewish faith. He was trying to emphasize, when you read Philo, he was trying to emphasize how special Moses must have been if God chose to talk to Moses out of everybody else in the world. So Philo was an educated, elite Jewish writer, philosopher who was influenced by Greco-Roman thought. Because there's the savior philosophy in the Greco-Roman world, and I'm sure that there was a time period, a couple hundred years prior to this time period, where the Jews were having a schism between themselves because there were some Jews that were trying to incorporate Greco-Roman or Greek ideas inside the philosophy, and Jews weren't having it. But Philo was kind of like a remnant of those times. So he attempted to write about Moses in the light of being a godlike man on earth. He advocated that I told you this already. So Paul, a younger educated contemporary, would have been familiar and also educated. Paul was educated, and he had money. We know he had money because he was writing on paper. Paper wasn't cheap. Paper cost about $30 per page. And Paul wrote a bunch of pages of paper. All these dang letters he wrote. So it's quite possible Paul was influenced by Philo. So to the Ebionites, Jesus was special. He was the most righteous, who was adopted by God at his baptism. So at the baptism, it said, John saw and heard a voice from heaven say, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." Jesus was begotten by God at baptism. So Jesus was chosen by God, and as a reward, God raised him from the dead. Now, to the Ebionites, he was the Jewish Messiah. So whoever wanted to follow Jesus had to be a Jew. That's why you had to convert to Judaism. If not Jewish, you had to convert. Ebionites tried to convert other Jews and insisted that Gentiles convert to Judaism. So most Jews, to the Jews, the Messiah was this grand conquering hero. And so when Jesus came as this poor dude that got hung up on a cross, they were like, nah, that's not how that couldn't be our guy. That's why they reject him, because he doesn't make any sense to that in their philosophy. So because the Messiah to them is riding on his horse, he's coming through, he's taking names. That's not how he was, And so they reject him. I think that's why they reject him to this day. They also rejected another person named Bar Kokhba. He was a leader of a third revolt. So we have the second war, which happened in the 70s. Then this third war, which happened in 132. Now, this was the war that just totally destroyed the temple and then sent the Jews in their latest diaspora. And there was also this brother named Shabbatai. He was a Jewish rabbi in 1666 who started another movement, and everybody thought he was a Messiah. He had thousands of followers known as Sabbateans, and they believed he was the Messiah and followed his teachings. So this Messiah thing is a Jewish mindset. It's a construct within the Jewish mind. waiting on the Messiah to arise. That's why you have people, even in the Christian philosophy, ideology framework, they come through like there's some special person. They're the Messiah. That's what you have, this nature boy type thing coming on. And so then people believe in it. That's why you have followers going out there to be with these people. So there's this idea that somebody in you are special. Really awkward, really weird, really interesting. So Ebionites insisted on remaining Jewish. They were vegetarian. They thought Jesus was completely a man, born like everybody else, adopted, no virgin birth, pre-existence, no divinity. Ebionites did not have the current canonical gospels. I'll talk about that later. So Jesus was Jewish. By the 2nd century, most Christians were converted polytheists who weren't interested in being Jews. So Paul said a person is made right not by works, but by faith. Ebionites didn't think highly of Paul. They argued and fought a lot. They followed James, Jesus' own brother, and headed to church of Jerusalem. They had their own gospel. They had the gospel of the Nazarenes, and an Aramaic translation of Matthew that didn't have chapters 1 and 2. This is very interesting, but we'll go on and talk about other aspects of Christianity that existed pre-Nicene Council. But definitely take note of who these people were, because they're important. Peace.